At a five-star hotel during one of the world's biggest financial forums, a billionaire collapses just before his keynote speech. But what looks like a medical emergency might be something far more sinister. In a place where everyone follows protocol, one woman breaks the pattern. A hotel maid who notices a wrong tea bag, a missing signature, a tray that doesn't belong. And when she realizes the poisoned cup may have been meant for the billionaire's daughter, she makes a choice that no one expects. A choice that will cost her everything or save a life. Stay with us to discover how one silent act of courage turns an invisible worker into the only person who sees what truly matters. At 6:58 a.m., May Carter came to a complete stop, her cart rolling an extra few inches before settling into stillness. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Her eyes locked on the tray left in front of Suite 2188, and in an instant, she registered 3 wrong details. The label affixed to the ticket was missing letters. The signature field for the server was left blank, and most critically, the tag on the teapot had been handwritten, not printed, with the words "Jasmine for Mr. Zhang" scribbled in uneven English. That tea choice alone would have been nothing to most people, but not to her. She knew what it meant. She had personally typed Victor Zhang's preferences into the guest database. She remembered doing it because he was one of the few guests who insisted on consistency down to the day. Oolong every morning, but never jasmine on Tuesdays. Ever. That rule had stuck with her because it was the kind of detail that made her good at her job. Seeing what others missed, remembering what no one asked her to remember. She bent slowly, as if picking something up, and lifted the teapot's lid just enough to let the scent reach her nose. The perfume of jasmine hit her immediately, floral, almost syrupy. She set it down, no confirmation needed. It was wrong, not just incorrect, deliberate. This wasn't someone grabbing the wrong tea in the kitchen. This was someone trying to slip past the patterns. She could walk away. She could report it, say she suspected something off, but by the time someone with authority acted, it might be too late. She didn't know what was happening yet, but she knew the kind of people who looked for shortcuts, and the kind who got stepped over in the process. Her earpiece clicked. "Carter, 2188 just called. Tray's ready for removal." The voice was casual, unaware. But before she could press the mic to respond, another voice overlapped on a separate channel, sharper, urgent. "Rick, we've got a medical call. Guest in 2188 went down. We need Patel now." May felt something cold bloom behind her ribs. Not panic, recognition. She didn't move immediately. Her mind was already working through the scenario. If Mr. Zhang was down, and that tray was involved, then the mistake wasn't random. It was planned. The jasmine had been delivered with purpose, not accident. Her gaze darted to the doorknob. Was someone inside watching this unfold? Would they have known if the tea had been taken by someone else? She stepped aside as 2 medics and a member of security came sprinting down the hall. Her hand tightened around the microfiber cloth, knuckles paling. She didn't speak, didn't volunteer anything, but she didn't walk away either. Her instincts were louder than protocol now. She edged closer to the suite as the door opened fully and a medic entered with his case. What she saw next changed everything. Inside the suite, Victor Zhang was slouched on the edge of a velvet couch, sweat visible on his hairline, his breathing shallow but steady. His assistant, Ethan Brooks, hovered nearby, looking overwhelmed, whispering rapid explanations to a man in a Navy security blazer. Rick, the head of hotel security. But May didn't focus on them. Her eyes went to the girl sitting on the floor next to the couch. Long dark hair, oversized hoodie, legs pulled up tight to her chest. Lena, Victor's daughter. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for help. She just stared straight ahead, her face pale, her lips slightly parted. Her right hand trembled. No one noticed her. Not really. The focus was all on Victor, his pressure, his color, his symptoms. But May saw the cup on the floor next to Lena, tipped sideways, a dark ring of jasmine tea pooling beneath it. And she saw the guilt in the girl's eyes, the subtle tilt of her head, as if she were bracing for blame. May stepped back into the hallway, pulse rising. It wasn't Victor who drank the tea, it was Lena, and nobody had figured that out yet. She moved quickly now, heading straight for the tray again. Her radio buzzed once more, someone asking if she had collected it yet. She ignored it. With her gloves on, she lifted the cup. The inside was still warm. The spoon had a faint yellow-green tinge near the handle, subtle, but May had seen it before once during a food safety inspection. That color didn't come from tea. It came from something ground, something added. Someone had tampered with it. She grabbed the service receipt and flipped it over. The lounge stamp was real, but smudged. The print format was wrong. The timestamp placed the tray outside the window when lounge breakfast was even served. This tray hadn't come from the kitchen. It had come from someone with access to back corridors and the right tools. Someone who assumed nobody would look twice at a hotel breakfast. Someone who didn't count on her. May turned back toward the open door. Inside, Lena now had her arms around her knees, her forehead resting there. Alone, unquestioned. May's fists clenched. If this wasn't stopped, the wrong person would take the blame, and Lena would quietly disappear under a story someone else crafted. She wasn't going to let that happen. Rick had already drawn conclusions. She could see it on his face. He was talking to Ethan, making assumptions about negligence, about protocol. The blame was going to land where it always did, somewhere convenient. The assistant, the staff, anyone but the real person. May knew how these things went. The hotel had a habit of keeping things clean, quiet, digestible. But this wasn't just another protocol breach. This was deliberate poisoning, and she was the only one who knew enough of the pieces to see it clearly. She stepped into the suite slowly, staying just beyond the boundary line of authority, but close enough to speak. She drank it, May said quietly, her voice sharp enough to cut through the buzz. Rick turned, confused. "Excuse me?" May didn't flinch. Lena, not her father. "She's the one who drank the tea." Lena lifted her head at the sound of her name. Everyone else froze. May watched the fear in the girl's eyes shift, just a little, into something else. Recognition. As if for the first time, someone in the room saw her. May's decision had already been made. She didn't need permission. She would act. She would intervene, even if no one had asked her to. Because someone had to. Because Lena Zhang was invisible in a room full of men making decisions. And May Carter had been invisible long enough to recognize what that meant. Lena Zhang sat cross-legged on the polished floor of the suite, the fabric of her expensive hoodie soaking through at the waist where the tea had spilled. The mug had slipped from her hand, somewhere between the wave of dizziness and the tightening of her chest, and now the scent of jasmine clung to her like guilt. Around her, adults spoke in clipped voices, none directed at her. They circled her father like bees, hotel security, the personal assistant Ethan, the doctor with his instruments. Her father was recovering now, slouched on the armchair, drinking water and insisting he was fine. They all believed the tea had been his. Not once did anyone ask her a direct question. No one seemed to notice the tea was all over her. Lena kept her eyes low, jaw locked, her nails digging into the cuffs of her sleeves. Her head buzzed with fragments of fear and shame, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because no one seemed interested in the truth. It was like she'd become invisible the moment she said, "I took a sip." They heard it, but no one heard it. She didn't know what she was supposed to do now. She didn't even know if she could stand up. A figure appeared beside her, quiet, unannounced. She didn't look up at first, assuming it was just another staff member clearing something, but the footsteps didn't retreat. Instead, they paused at her side, deliberate, unintrusive. "Was it you who drank it?" The voice was low, female, calm. That got Lena's attention. She turned her head slightly, expecting to see someone from the security team, but instead found a woman in a simple, pressed uniform. Housekeeping. A name tag said, May. Lena blinked at her, uncertain whether to lie. But something about the way the woman asked, not accusing, not concerned with blame, made her just nod. A single, slow nod. May nodded too once. No follow-up, no dramatic reaction. Just a kind of quiet understanding that settled in like a blanket. Lena felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Nobody else had even looked her in the eye, but this woman did. And in that one moment, she didn't feel like the daughter of a billionaire or the girl who drank the wrong tea. She felt seen. That small, ridiculous thing almost broke her composure. But she swallowed it down and hugged her knees tighter. May didn't push. She just crouched a little closer, like she had all the time in the world. What did it taste like? May asked after a pause. Lena frowned. No one else had asked that. Bitter, she said softly. But it was jasmine. It smelled normal. I thought maybe they'd switched it by mistake. I didn't want to bother anyone. May nodded again, as if that made perfect sense. And your father? Did he try it? He was going to, Lena said, but he said it felt off for a Tuesday. He's weird about routine. I told him I'd try it. I didn't think anything was wrong, just one sip. Her voice trembled on the last word. One sip. That's all it had taken to start this chaos. May didn't interrupt her. She simply absorbed the information like it mattered, and it did. Lena couldn't explain why this woman's presence felt so anchoring, but it did. She wasn't speaking loudly. She wasn't making promises. But she was here. And Lena, who had learned to trust very few people in rooms full of polished shoes and curated smiles, found herself strangely comforted by the company of a woman with calloused hands and a linen cart parked quietly in the hallway. Behind them, the voices of the others blurred into background noise, decisions being made, theories discussed, suspicions cast. Ethan was still protesting something about the delivery process, and the head of security was fixated on the tray. Nobody had the full picture. But May was piecing it together, Lena could tell. She asked no more questions about who made the tea or who brought the tray. She asked questions that mattered. Questions like, did you feel lightheaded before or after the sip? And did it burn your throat? Lena answered each one quietly, instinctively trusting her. May listened the way few adults ever listened to Lena, not like she was a teenager to manage or a potential liability, but like she was someone with vital information. When Lena's voice caught again, May reached out and pulled a clean hand towel from her apron, handing it over without a word. It was such a basic gesture, but in that moment it felt monumental. May didn't offer her pity. She offered her presence. And Lena didn't even realize how much she needed that until her fingers clenched around the towel like a lifeline. Minutes passed. May stayed crouched beside her, quiet as a shadow, while the others continued their dissection of what had happened. Lena didn't want to look back at them. She wanted to stay in this strange bubble where things were simple and slow, where someone was paying attention to her, not just because she might be a victim, but because she was a person. They're going to keep looking in the wrong direction, Lena said suddenly, voice hoarse. May didn't ask who they were. She just replied, not if I can help it. And the way she said it, soft, flat, almost like a promise, made Lena believe her. For the first time since drinking that tea, Lena's shoulders loosened slightly. Something about May made it possible to breathe again. There was no badge, no official authority, just presence, stillness, integrity. And for Lena, who had spent most of her life surrounded by people chasing power, that was more protection than any security team had ever given her. Lena remained seated on the floor, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her once pristine hoodie still damp with jasmine tea. The room buzzed with activity, but she no longer tracked it. Her attention was locked on the woman sitting beside her, calm and quiet, as if she belonged there more than anyone else. No more questions, No more explanations. Just a nod shared between them, small but loaded. Lena knew now what May had seen that no one else did, that the cup wasn't meant for her father, it had been meant for her. And somehow, that knowledge, rather than terrifying her, grounded her, because someone finally saw it. Someone wasn't trying to fit her into a convenient story. Someone noticed the tea, the tremor, the silence, that someone was a woman most people ignored, but not Lena, not anymore. That moment, that nod, had changed something. It had begun something, something quiet, something wordless, something Lena wasn't ready to name, but she trusted it. For now, that was enough. Rick Coleman was already halfway through building his version of the narrative when May slipped out of view. In front of the suite, he stood squared and confident, his voice firm as he directed the two uniformed officers toward Ethan Brooks, the assistant who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. "He insisted on the jasmine," Rick repeated, tapping his tablet like it were gospel. "Said it himself, deviated from the guest's dietary norm." Ethan protested, desperate. "He never takes jasmine on Tuesdays. That's the one thing I always—" "That you always what?" Rick cut him off. "Always remember? Because the tray says otherwise." His tone was razor sharp, a show for the lobby cameras waiting downstairs. This would be clean. An ambitious assistant overstepping boundaries, an unfortunate incident, but handled. May watched the scene from the edge of the hallway, her cart in front of her like a shield, invisible to them. She knew this rhythm. The hotel needed its villain quickly, and preferably someone disposable. But the pieces didn't fit. The details were off, and that was her territory. She didn't know who poisoned the tea yet, but she knew it wasn't the man they were pointing at. Not this time. She started retracing the tray's journey with the quiet efficiency of someone who had cleaned behind all their facades. The ticket on the tray had no signature, unusual for lounge orders. The seal was clearly misprinted. Execu Ive Club. That told her one thing immediately. The backup printer, used only when the lounge system was down, or more rarely, when someone bypassed it. The tea tag was handwritten. Not in the blocky style of kitchen staff, not even close. She ducked into the hallway service terminal and flipped through the system logs. No breakfast order was processed for 2188 in the last hour. That narrowed it down. May opened the radio on the staff channel. "Tony," she said calmly, "who delivered breakfast to 2188 between 6:40 and 6:50? The voice came back groggy. "Nobody from us, May. Just saw the flower delivery cart roll through, that was all." Flower delivery. That didn't make sense. Florals weren't cleared for this floor without a manager escort. Her breath quickened slightly. Someone had slipped in under a uniform. Someone counting on no one looking down. She took the back stairwell 2 floors down toward the lower utility corridor. She had a theory, and the only way to test it was to check a place no guest or manager ever looked. The laundry wing was nearly empty at this hour, except for 2 attendants folding sheets with headphones in. May nodded to them silently and went deeper, past the racks of uniforms and fresh towels, to the back where cleaning carts were stored between shifts. She wasn't looking for anything assigned to her team. She was looking for something off, and then she saw it. Tucked behind an unused linen rack, half concealed by a curtain of hanging aprons, a flower delivery cart that didn't belong. The logo on the side, Flower and Pine, was real. The hotel worked with them occasionally, but this wasn't the standard delivery crate. It had scuffs on the sides, heavier wheels and, most importantly, a grey storage compartment beneath the bed of boxed lilies. She crouched and opened it. There it was, a portable label printer, small, black and still warm. Alongside it, a roll of sticker tape. She fed the tape through and printed a test label. Executive Club. Only it wasn't. The T was missing, just like the one on the tray. Her fingers froze. This was the source. Someone had manufactured the room service label by hand, bypassing the system. This was no mistake. It was choreography. She went further, searching every pocket, every layer. In the bottom corner of the cart, beneath a half-empty water bottle and what looked like florist's twine, she found something else. A spoon. Just a basic hotel spoon. But the stem was smeared faintly in a greenish tint. May lifted it close and narrowed her eyes. It wasn't residue from tea leaves. It was too sticky, too opaque. She smelled it. Bitter. Chemical. She'd seen a similar stain before, back when a guest had crushed sleeping pills into his tea and the maid found him snoring mid-meeting. It was the same green olive powder, only this time it was deliberate. She wrapped the spoon in a towel and tucked it into her apron. No one was going to find this unless they were looking, and clearly no one was. Rick was up there blaming the assistant. The cameras had focused on the wrong hallway. The story had already been shaped for press. May stood up and looked around. Everything here had been designed to go unnoticed. The poisoner didn't just rely on chemicals. They relied on the assumption that no one paid attention to what rolled through service corridors. But May always paid attention. Back in the hallway, Rick's voice was rising, now talking logistics with a PR rep on a video call. If we get the press statement out before noon, we control the story. We emphasize swift response and internal accountability. May walked past without a word, unnoticed as ever. But in her pocket were the truths they refused to see. Not one, not two, but 5 key signs had been overlooked. The 5th tray, the fake one, had been crafted with such subtlety it would have passed any surface inspection. But the flaws were clear. The label, the spoon, the path through the wrong stairwell. She ran the checklist in her head again. Someone had accessed the backup printer, knew where to find old carts, and had the nerve to slide through the hotel's service arteries like one of them. That took knowledge. That took planning. And most of all, that took knowing exactly who wouldn't notice and who would be blamed instead. Rick never questioned it. Neither did security. The only reason it was still unraveling was because May didn't look up. She looked sideways, down, beneath. That was how she found things no one else did. She stared at the printer again, before covering it back with a cloth and wheeling the cart further into the back, just in case. No cameras would catch her here, but she wasn't doing it to hide. She was doing it to buy time. Rick would never believe her without evidence, not while the assistant was an easier scapegoat, but she wasn't here to please Rick. She was here because a girl was nearly poisoned and no one cared enough to notice. She pressed her hand to her apron where the spoon sat, now wrapped in 2 towels, and took a breath. This wasn't about tea. It wasn't even about the target. It was about the way people like Rick never looked at the systems under their feet. They trusted uniforms, logos, cameras, reports. But they never looked at the wheel tracks on the floor or questioned a missing letter. And now, as May Carter stood in the middle of the laundry wing with a ghost cart, a crooked label and green dust on her fingers, she realized what the real poison was. Not the powder in the cup, but the negligence of people who only ever looked up. May crossed the lobby of the North Bridge with the same practiced gait she'd used for a decade. Not hurried, not idle, invisible to most. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. She wasn't carrying a feather duster or linens this time. She was carrying knowledge, and it was heavier than any cart she'd ever pushed. As she passed the towering arrangement of orchids near the concierge, her mind sorted the last of the puzzle pieces. The wrong tea, the wrong tag, the forged tray, the timeline. Lena wasn't collateral, she was the target. Someone had tried to silence her before her panel, not kill her, not exactly, but sideline her, discredit her, make her miss the one chance she had to be heard in a room where no one like her ever was. May's jaw locked. She had seen this before, in other shapes. Women pushed aside by subtleties, not bullets. But this was bolder, riskier. and it had happened under her watch. She saw Victor Zhang from across the marble floor, seated again now, surrounded by PR aides and security men pretending to do something. But his eyes were no longer scanning the crowd. They were fixed on her, and something in them had shifted. It was the way he looked at her that made her stop, not with suspicion, but with recognition. May didn't slow her stride, but the contact lingered. She knew the moment his gaze flicked to the tray of linens beside her and understood it wasn't really linens. He was used to rooms where power came with silence, and in May's silence he recognized a different kind of power, not status, not title, but command of detail, of systems, of the invisible things that kept his empire upright. She didn't need to nod. He didn't need to speak. But respect replaced distrust, and that was a transaction May had never expected from a man like him. Behind Victor, Rick was talking into a walkie, trying to regain control of a situation already out of his depth. His plan had collapsed. No assistant to blame, no story to feed the press yet, and no idea where the weak points in his building truly were. May saw it all and made her decision without asking anyone. She turned her radio to the side channel. "Lords, Shay, I need carts. Load clean linens, but fold in 2 of the overcoats from Lost and Found. Meet me on 21. Bring hats. Move." And no questions followed. That was the gift of being underestimated. Her team followed her before anyone noticed. Back upstairs, Lena sat on the edge of the bed, jacket pulled around her, hands still trembling. "Hey," May said softly, not like a maid, but like someone reaching across a fault line. Lena looked up, wary, lips tight. May nodded once. "We're leaving in 10. Lena blinked. "We?" May didn't answer with words. She went to the closet and pulled a black laundry bag, unzipped it, and took out a folded housekeeping coat. "Put this on. Button it fully. Hair in the cap. Don't speak unless I say." Lena hesitated. "Are you serious?" "Very," May said. "They won't protect you out there. I will." That was enough. The girl stood, her limbs stiff, and did what she was told. May watched her, assessing how much she could carry, emotionally, physically. She was brave, but not used to being hunted. May, on the other hand, had been dodging systems her whole life. She opened the side compartment of the linen cart and tucked in the marked spoon, the fake label, the tag from the tea. Evidence, in case they needed it. Then she handed Lena a feather duster. "You're Lords now. She's on break. Don't forget that." Downstairs, the plan unfolded like muscle memory. Shay and Lords appeared at the service elevator as if on a normal swap. One nodded to May, the other gave Lena a wink. The jackets hid their forms, the hats concealed their hair, and carts were loaded exactly like any other morning run. "We'll take the central chute," May said. "Avoid the sea tower. Cameras run hot there. We'll cross behind the kitchens and take service exit B." Rick would never think to monitor it. He didn't know how the plumbing overlapped behind the catering kitchen. He didn't know that the exit alarm had been faulty for 3 weeks. May did. Lena didn't speak, but her fingers gripped the cart's handle tighter as they moved. Her body was still jittery, her breath uneven, but her eyes no longer darted around in panic. They stayed on May, fixed like an anchor. Trust, even if hesitant, had taken root, and trust was everything in a place like this. In silence, they moved past open staff doors, through invisible hallways, blending into the rhythms of a hotel that functioned on the illusion of control. May never glanced back. The only way out was forward. They reached the rear corridor just as a vendor passed by with a fruit crate. May pulled Lena aside with a hand on her shoulder, firm and calm. "Timing matters. When he turns the corner, we move." Lena nodded, her lips pale. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. May looked at her, not like a stranger, not like a billionaire's daughter, but like someone who mattered. "Because no one else is." Lena swallowed. blinking hard. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," May replied. "Thank me when we're out the door." The fruit vendor turned. May gave the signal. They rolled forward again. No one questioned them. 2 maids, a cart, a routine. But Lena knew now. This wasn't routine. This was survival, built on years of May learning the paths no one else cared to memorize. And Lena, who had only ever walked front entrances, only ever been announced, now saw the world May walked every day, the passages that belonged to the unseen, the routes where power didn't come from spotlight, but from knowing when not to be seen. For the first time in her life, Lena walked through the back corridors of a luxury hotel with her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with ambition or performance. She wasn't rushing to a panel or slipping out of an after-party. She was escaping a trap. But as they moved through the beige-painted arteries of the building, Lena realized she wasn't just scared. She felt safe. Not because there were cameras or bodyguards or PR statements waiting, but because there was May, steady, unreadable, precise. A woman who knew this place better than anyone and who had chosen to protect her without permission, without reward. Lena didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Some safety didn't come from surveillance or status. It came from people who knew the exits by heart. And in that quiet, disguised march through the backbones of the North Bridge, she understood May Carter wasn't just a maid. She was the reason Lena was still alive. The service elevator slid downward with a quiet hum, but the silence inside was charged. Lena stood beside the linen cart, her posture stiff under the ill-fitting housekeeping jacket. Her eyes stayed fixed on May, watching her every movement, as if the older woman carried answers stitched into the seams of her uniform. The space between them wasn't wide, but it held the weight of something fragile. Trust, in its rawest, most cautious form. May didn't speak. She kept her hand loosely on the cart's handle, her body angled just enough to monitor Lena without making her feel studied. As the elevator neared the ground floor, Lena broke the silence, her voice hoarse from adrenaline and leftover panic. "Why are you doing this?" May's eyes flicked to her, unreadable. She didn't answer immediately. The doors opened with a soft ding and the cart rolled forward. Only once they were in the corridor, wheels bumping over the uneven tile near the laundry chutes, did May speak. Not loudly, not gently, just honestly. Because no one else would. Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. The words landed like an anchor in her chest. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway that wound behind the staff cafeteria and into the secondary access wing. May led with deliberate ease, knowing the turn points not just from memory, but from instinct. She had walked these halls more times than she could count, but never under these stakes. Her mind ticked off the variables. Which exits had faulty alarms, which cameras were dummy units, which corners were safe for pause. Behind her, Lena followed without hesitation, her silence no longer rooted in fear alone, but in something closer to reverence. She had grown up in environments where power was obvious, suited men with press releases and bodyguards with clipped earpieces. But this was different. May's power came from foresight, from knowing where every thread connected. It was a kind of command that came not from orders, but from competence so deep it became invisible. When they reached the lower mechanical hallway, May gave a slight wave to a janitor passing in the opposite direction. A silent exchange that meant nothing unusual here. The janitor didn't flinch. That was the genius of the plan. Invisibility wasn't a disguise, it was the system itself. At the end of the hall, just before the delivery dock, they paused. May glanced at her watch. Timing still mattered. Outside, the SUV would be arriving through a pretext Rick had managed to send. Special pickup for vendor equipment. The car was unmarked, black, no hotel logos. Lena leaned against the concrete wall, breathing through her nose. "You think they'll try again?" she asked. May didn't answer at first. She checked the rear door. still ajar, just enough to see the edge of the loading bay. "If they were bold enough to try here, yes," she said, "but not like this. Not once you're out of sight." Lena rubbed her palms against the fabric of the jacket. "I didn't even drink all of it, just a sip." May turned to her, eyes sharp. "Sometimes a sip is all it takes, especially if it's just meant to slow you down, keep you out of the spotlight, discredit you without killing you." Lena exhaled slowly, the reality settling like sediment in her thoughts. "My father thinks I'm reckless," she said. "Maybe he's right." May gave her a look that stopped her cold. Or maybe he's too used to being the only one in the room who matters. The dock door opened with a quiet groan. May gestured and the second laundry cart rolled in behind them, pushed by Shay, who gave Lena a discreet nod. The SUV was waiting just outside the gate, engine running, driver tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. Victor Zhang was already being escorted by Brooks, half covered by a porter's coat, eyes darting but alert. He saw Lena and moved instinctively toward her. "You're okay?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, suddenly unable to speak. May Carter sat in the laundry inventory room, fingers moving methodically across a stack of freshly washed pillowcases, her pen ticking boxes beside SKU numbers like it was any other Tuesday. But it wasn't. The hotel had nearly become the epicenter of an international scandal that morning, and May had stopped it. Yet here she was, logging linens, no medal, no mention, just silence. She didn't need applause, she never had, but the hollow way everyone moved past her, as though she were nothing more than a folded shadow, stung in a way she couldn't admit aloud. Downstairs, Harold Whitman was giving a carefully worded statement to the press, balancing smiles with protocol, brushing over the incident as a matter swiftly handled thanks to internal coordination. Rick hovered nearby, arms crossed, nodding. No one said her name. Not once. She caught Shay passing by the door and offered a tight smile. Shay hesitated, then returned it, lips parting like she wanted to say something. Thank you, maybe. But the moment slipped away. Back to counting. Back to invisible. Her notepad filled with check marks. The silence of omission was louder than any praise. Around 3 p.m., a hush moved through the back corridor. Not the awkward kind that follows gossip, but a purposeful silence, like the kind that precedes a shift in gravity. May didn't look up until she heard the unmistakable weight of deliberate footsteps, heavy soles that didn't belong to housekeepers or bellboys. 2 men in sleek black suits moved down the hallway, forming a loose V around a third figure. Victor Zhang. No longer pale, no longer fragile. He moved with the authority of someone who had been vulnerable in public and chosen not to hide from it. May stood, instinctively smoothing her uniform, uncertain if she should speak first. Victor didn't hesitate. He bypassed the managers scrambling to intercept him, ignoring Harold's outstretched hand and Paula's breathless attempts to guide him into a VIP lounge. His eyes locked on May. No drama, no build-up, just clarity. "You didn't follow anyone's script," he said plainly. "You followed your own. That saved my daughter's life." May didn't blink. She wanted to, needed to, but his words landed deeper than she expected. She had done her job, yes, but not like this. She had stepped beyond it, broken protocol, defied structure, things that people like her were taught not to do. And now, here was this man, this billionaire who could have bought silence or chosen denial, speaking to her like an equal. She didn't know how to receive that. "I did what needed to be done," she said after a moment. No one else was going to see it. Victor nodded slowly, like he understood that more than he let on. From his jacket pocket, he drew out a small black card, thick matte stock, embossed only with his name and a direct number. He held it out without flourish. "If you ever want a place where people listen, where what you know matters, you call me." The hallway around them froze in time. No one moved. No one spoke. Her hand didn't tremble as she took the card, but it felt heavier than it should have. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. It was more than a gesture. It was a reversal. The hierarchy had shifted. Not by much, but enough for May to feel it. Still, she said nothing. She didn't thank him. She didn't cry. She didn't make promises. That wasn't her way. Instead, she gave the smallest of nods, then tucked the card into the pocket of her uniform between her checklist and her hotel-issued pen. Victor seemed to understand the gravity of her silence. He gave her a slight bow, nothing ostentatious, but enough to make Harold's jaw lock in the background. The managers fidgeted, unsure if they should applaud or pretend they hadn't seen anything. May turned back to her inventory sheet without dismissing him. That was her answer, calm, measured, real. Victor stepped away, and the hallway shifted again. The moment passed, but it had left a mark. Paula mumbled something about front desk logs needing cross-checking and vanished. Harold stood still for a beat longer, then finally turned on his heel, barking into his phone about press briefings and optics. May didn't watch them go. She just resumed her task. Line by line, pillowcase by pillowcase, she finished what she had started that morning. But her mind wasn't on the linens anymore. It was on the slim card, burning like a brand against her hip. She didn't want to admit it, but something had cracked open inside her. Not pride, not ambition. Something quieter, a possibility, one that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Back at her station, as she filed the last pillowcase and signed off the shift sheet, she realized she hadn't yet let herself breathe since Victor walked away. She finally did. A full breath, slow and steady, like she'd been underwater and just broken the surface. She reached into her pocket and touched the card again, not to read it, but just to confirm it was real, that someone had seen her, really seen her, and chosen not to look away. She didn't need a headline. She didn't need applause. What she needed, what she had earned, was the truth of the moment that had just passed. She went back to cataloging as if nothing had changed, but everything had. She didn't promise anything, but she kept the card, and that was enough. At the end of a day that felt impossibly long, May Carter sat in the staff break room with her hands wrapped around a paper cup of oolong tea. It was the same drink she had every Tuesday, a habit so automatic it once felt meaningless. But today, it tasted different, not in flavor, but in weight. It wasn't just tea anymore. It was a reminder that rituals, even the smallest ones, could anchor people when everything around them shifted. Her back ached, her knees protested every movement, but none of that mattered. Not now. She stirred the tea absently, watching the leaves swirl as if they held secrets. The hum of the vending machine buzzed in the corner, ignored. No one had spoken to her directly about what happened, no public acknowledgement, no announcement. But the eyes of her colleagues had changed. Not reverent, not fearful, just aware. Like they'd realized she wasn't invisible after all. Even so, she made no effort to gloat. That wasn't her. May lived in the layers beneath, in what people overlooked. And today, that had made all the difference. Shay entered the room, walking lightly, though her face betrayed the fatigue of too many hours and not enough rest. She slid into the chair beside May without asking, nudging her gently with an elbow. "You want to see this?" Shay said, pulling out her phone. May raised an eyebrow, but didn't speak. Shay tapped the screen and turned it toward her. It was a message, short, just a few words. But the sender's name stopped May's breath for a moment. Lena Zhang. The girl whose life she had saved without ever asking for thanks. The girl who had trusted her in silence. "Tell her I'm okay," the message read. No emoji, no signature, but it didn't need either. May read it once, then again. There was something grounding in the way Lena had phrased it. No drama, no exaggeration, just clarity. She was okay, alive, healing. The unspoken thread was that she wanted May to know it. And May did. She didn't reply, just nodded once to Shay, the corners of her lips lifting in the faintest smile she'd allowed herself all day. She sat with that smile for longer than she expected, as if allowing her body to catch up with the emotional tectonic shift still settling inside her. Then, without a word, she reached for the company-issued tablet she'd left on the side table. It was time. She logged into the maintenance interface, scrolled through the floors, and found the notation log for room 2188. Her fingers hovered for a second. It wasn't just a routine update. It was a declaration, a boundary, a piece of truth carved into the infrastructure of the hotel where so many people worked hard to forget things. But May didn't forget. She typed the first part slowly, almost reverently. Never Jasmine on Tuesdays. She paused. That alone would have been enough, once. But not anymore. Not after what had happened, not after what nearly had. She continued typing, Route C, exclusive use with escort. Simple, functional. But anyone who understood how hotels like this worked, who understood how danger slipped through gaps and rituals, would see it for what it was, a safeguard. A warning, a memory built into protocol. These weren't just internal notes. They were her legacy, written not in headlines or medals, but in system logs and employee manuals, where quiet heroes left their mark. May hit save. The update flashed green. The note was now part of the official hotel record. She set the tablet down and took another sip of her tea. The taste was steady, familiar, but not the same. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine what might come next. Not just another shift, not just another Tuesday, something more. She thought of the black card still tucked in her pocket, its weight undeniable even when she wasn't holding it. She hadn't decided what to do with it yet, and maybe she wouldn't for a while. But she hadn't thrown it away. That, in itself, was a decision. A few other staff members filtered into the break room, whispering about the press conference, the arrest, the sudden exit of several executives on leave. The undercurrent of chaos still hadn't fully left the building, but May had, at least internally. Her world had expanded just enough to include a sliver of new possibility, one built not on promotions or job titles, but on the knowledge that she mattered. That being meticulous, being quiet, being the one who always noticed things. Those were strengths, not flaws. She caught one last glimpse of the Hudson through the narrow window at the end of the corridor. The river glinted gold in the late light, moving like nothing had changed. But she had. May stood slowly, stretching her legs, and placed her empty cup in the bin. Her fingers brushed against the fabric of her pocket. The card was still there, still waiting, still real. At the end of the day, as the sun shimmered over the Hudson like any other Tuesday, May Carter sat in the staff break room and finished her tea. Oolong, as always. Across from her, Shay gave her a quiet smile, tapping the message from Lena once more as if to say, this mattered. May didn't say anything back. She didn't have to. Instead, she opened the tablet again, double-checked her annotation on room 2188, and nodded to herself. Never Jasmine on Tuesdays. Route C, escort only. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. Just small, deliberate words, written by someone who understood that what people overlooked could be the very thing that saved a life. And sometimes, just sometimes, that same overlooked truth was where a new story began. We pour our hearts into creating every story here on the channel, not just to entertain, but to connect, to move, and to remind you that the quietest people often carry the loudest truths. If this story meant something to you, let us know in the comments. We really do read them. Subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing you stories like this one. Your support is what keeps this community alive and growing. Thank you for being part of it. We'll see you in the next story.